Hey MBA hopefuls, we are on air with MBA Waves, your weekly vidcast talking all things business and education, streaming live every Tuesday on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, bringing you tons of tips to get you into a top rank MBA program. And we also get you up and close with many of the top schools that we host on the show, where you can get all your questions answered. And if you like this week's episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today on episode 112, we're going to talk about the myths of round one, and it's all the more pertinent given that round one is like hardly like a month away, literally. And so we're going to talk about two things, like how can you get ready for round one, but what are the most common myths. And I'm your host Krithika Srinivasan, joined by my co-host Bara Sapir of City Test Prep. Hi Bara.
Hi, good to see you.
And good to see you. And we have a special guest today, Shari Holland from Stacey Blackman Consulting. Hi Shari, how are you doing?
Hello, doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to request Shari to give us a brief introduction about yourself, and then we jump right into the topic.
Sure, absolutely. Well, very happy to be here. Thank you both for inviting me. You said, my name's Sherry Holland. I'm with Stacey Blackman Consulting and have been for, oh my gosh, I mean, it's like over 10 years now, 15 years with Stacey Blackman. I can't believe it. I have to, but before that, I worked at Duke at the admissions office at the Fuqua School of Business for several years. So that's kind of where I got my expertise in the business school admissions process. And I loved my time there and worked a lot with international students in recruiting. And then I've just been doing consulting for the last, like I said, I think it's been like 15 years now. So happy to be here and help if I can, give some insight.
Great. It's great to have you.
That's amazing. You have like a wealth of admissions consulting knowledge among all of us. So we're going to jump in right in. Round one, what is the biggest myth?
Oh, well, I guess the biggest one, and the one I thought, we were going to focus on is like, should I apply in round one? Is round two better? Are all the rounds the same? I think that's a question that a lot of clients ask and a lot of candidates ask. And you'll get different answers from different people. And just like the admissions process, it's extremely subjective. So I say that because I have peers at Stacey Blackman who answer a little bit differently, and that doesn't make them wrong and me right, or vice versa. It just means it's a different approach. In general, I mean, the bottom line is, and I hope that everybody would know this, is that you want to apply when your application is as strong as it possibly can be. So if you're not ready for round one, if you need to retake your test, if you need to polish those essays more, I mean, there's always polishing that can be done. So at some point, you just have to say, I'm ready to submit. But if there's any way that you can enhance your candidacy between round one and round two, then I say wait. But in general, the way I always say it is, you want to apply as early as you possibly can, as long as your application is as strong as it can be. That's basically, but a lot of people ask that, and then there's a lot of variables within there, within that, and how much stronger can you make your GMAT score or your GRE score? That's kind of a personal decision. So I hope that
helps. Higher. It can go higher.
It can go higher. Yeah, Bara knows.
It can get better.
I'm sorry, my lighting isn't so great, so I apologize, but
yeah, I think that people have this idea that it's better to get it in early rather than later, but if there are so many variables, right? And with round one, it's like, are you really ready? And have you really prepared yourself and planned to be ready? But sometimes life has curveballs, right? And you might not have expected you were going to apply, and it could be that it's much better to wait, right? Because your application is going to be that much stronger. And, the adcoms that I've spoken to or that we've seen, like they often talk about, like, it always depends, right? So don't try to second guess the process. Just put your best foot forward and don't labor it. But yeah, I'd agree that's what I've heard. I don't really deal with it so much, but that's what I've heard.
So breaking it down even further, what exactly do we mean by being ready or having like the best foot forward or knowing when it's the best application? What are some tips for it?
Well, I'm actually working with clients now who are determining, do I want to apply round one? And I'll never force or push a client to apply in round one if he or she is not ready. If the application isn't as strong as it can be. And what that means is looking at, obviously the essays are a huge component in the application itself. But I've got some clients who have issues with their recommenders, right? So the recommenders, for whatever reason, are taking time off right now, and they haven't been able to finalize them, and they're not sure, they're not confident they can get them in place and aligned by the deadlines for round one. That would be a huge stumbling block, right? I mean, you need to have them. So, it's just every component of the application. You want to make sure that everyone is prepared and it's as strong as it can possibly be. So definitely. And then the scores, obviously, people, like Bara says, you can always improve your score. I mean, there's certain people, either they've maxed out in the number of tests they can take, or they know they've just hit their ceiling. This is where, it is what it is. Sherry is what they tell me. And I'm like, okay, if that's the case, then let's move forward and do what we can with what we have. And so that's, but definitely recommenders can be a stumbling block for some folks.
How much time would you give to getting these recommendations?
That's another. I always recommend giving them at least a month, because people have weddings to go to and they have vacations and they get sick. And, I encourage at least a month, if at all possible. Of course, again, always variables. I mean, some folks can't let their bosses know any earlier than the latest possible time, or maybe not at all until they've been admitted and they're moving forward. But I want to give them as much time as possible. And if anybody listening in, something that I say for recommendations, a tip I give my clients is give them one date to submit their applications. Or to submit their recommendations. Don't give them 17 different deadlines to meet. That will make their heads explode. Your recommenders, they've got enough going on, and it's already a kind of a big ask for many of my clients to ask for the recommendation, just because they feel like it's so onerous. It truly isn't when you actually get down to doing it, but I know it seems like it is. But don't give them 5 or 10 different dates to apply. This is for Stern, and this is for Harvard, and this is for Stanford. Give them one date. I normally say, hey, make it September 1. If you're applying round 1, make it September 1. Make it easy. They've got the deadline. They can make that. So that's what I recommend. And obviously they adjust as necessary for their own recommenders.
And Bara, like, you are someone, like, obviously so close to the tests. What do you think is a good score? And of course, Sherry, back to you as well.
A good score. I mean, it's so interesting. I think that a person needs to score the best that they can score. And that, for some people, they can actually achieve a 750, a 780, and other people it's a 650. Other people, it's finding the right fit for a school, and you're only going to be able to score as well as you can score. And if you give yourself so much pressure about trying to get an 800 or a 780, you're actually going to be hurting yourself. It's kind of sabotaging yourself. All of these tests are coachable, right? So you actually could get higher than you can typically perform in life on some of these tests, but you really want to be in the right cohort with the right professors, with the right students. So, as long as you're scoring, I think now the common wisdom is that it needs to be above a 700. It didn't used to be like that for schools, and the top schools, you're needing into the 700s. But if you're a stellar person and you've done amazing things and you can handle the math, it's going to be okay if your score isn't completely sparkling, right? And there's going to be other parts of your application that you want to shine who you are and what it's about, because it is a number. But if you want to score your best, you can get there by being present and learning the material and practicing. Does that make sense to both of you, the way I described that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What do you think, Sherry? What's a great score?
Well, I agree with you. I think, above a 700 is ideal. I work with clients all the time who are not above a 700, and depending on the school that they're applying to, and like you said, the other components of their application, like who are they as a person? Like, what do they have to contribute to the learning environment that's not necessarily quantitative? I mean, there's I was just on a call recently with someone who went into Stern's business school, and she had no quantitative background at all, and went and succeeded there. So it's it just kind of depends what other what else you bring to the table, right? What other work experience, life experience. I mean, they want diversity in all areas, not just the top scores. Of course, scores help. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I won't lie, but it is just a number, and it's one piece of the puzzle. So I agree, but I think 700 or above is kind of the standard now. I mean, for a GMAT, GREs
Right.
vary a little bit more, in the ones, if you can shoot for 160 or above. I mean, I think some schools are at 165, both scores. That's pretty hard. I forget which one that is. Is that Stanford? I can't remember if it's Stanford, but they're pretty high for the elite schools.
Yeah. Would you say, I don't think you mentioned this, that it's more difficult to get into a school in later rounds, or that talk about that.
Okay. I think so. Now, granted, no, I think almost every top 20, top 25 admissions committee member, if you talk to them and ask them what's the difference between round 1 and round 2, they will tell you nothing, that it's pretty much the same. It's equal. As you get further into the rounds, it becomes more difficult because they've already filled part of their class. Now, the way I see it, and again, I differ with some folks. With my clients, I say absolutely, if you can apply in round 1, apply in round 1 if you're ready, because all the seats are available, right? So they've got all their seats available, and if you've got some blemishes on your application and you can get in there before they've admitted other folks with blemishes on their applications, you have a better shot. Now, there's another side to that, so that's my how I convey what I convey to clients. But other folks are like, but all the really strong candidates are applying in round 1, all the people who've been preparing and are ready, so I'm putting myself up against a more competitive applicant pool. Yes and no. I mean, it's an argument, and I can see that, but I don't think that that's a good reason to push to round 2 if you're ready for round 1. So, but I think once you get into past round 2, you're definitely limiting your chances. And anybody with any kind of blemish, or has something where they're not, whatever, it's a GPA problem or a GMAT score or whatever, that may be an issue. And so I always say apply as early as you possibly can.
Yeah, we often talk
So
about.
I was thinking.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking about like 2 things that you mentioned here. So one was like, probably one way would be to compare the scores that somebody has with what the average is, to see that at least they're like certain points above, to make sure that they're like coming up, or like having a competitive edge over the others. And the other thing that I realized when you were talking about it is that many of the components may not be entirely in the control of an applicant, because it's not, at the end of the day, as we all know, it's a whole class that they want to put together, and not just one person or somebody else, right? So one question I have for you, Shari, based on this is, have you seen something change as an admissions consultant versus as a person in the admissions office, especially with respect to the rounds?
So have I seen changes in, like, from my perspective as an admissions officer and then as an admissions consultant? Is that the question? Sorry.
Yeah, when it comes to like giving advice about the rounds and so on.
Not really. I mean, I would encourage, when I was at Duke, at Fuqua, we would want to see them. I think the party line was, the director of admissions at the time was like, apply as early as you possibly can, without jeopardizing the quality of your application. That was the standard line. So if that quality is up and as strong as it can possibly be, I mean, again, I say that with a little bit of caution, because it can always be polished a little bit more. And I've got those clients who are like, oh, I'm just going to do a little bit more wordsmithing and a little bit more polishing. I'm like, yeah, but at some point you just have to say this is a solid representation of who I am and what I have to offer, and hit the submit button, because it can get, just kind of stuck if you don't just decide. But so anyway, my point is that I kind of went on a tangent, was that we always encourage them to apply as early as they could, and I've continued that throughout my consulting as a consultant, encouraging them, but then again, not pushing, because I've got, like I said, I have clients right now who are not sure that they're ready for round one or will be, and I'm like, well, we won't hit submit until it's as strong as it can possibly be, and if it means we push to round two, we push to round two, and that's okay.
What are some of the things that students will bring to you at that you're surprised are still myths after all these years that you've been working in the field? Like, what are some things that you're surprised that people still believe?
I guess, I mean, it's kind of silly, but I think they think that getting a recommender who has a stronger, higher title than really somebody who knows them well is one of those. And they're like, oh, well, I can have the CEO write my letter of recommendation. I'm like, okay, great. How well does she or he know you? And well, they know my name. And I'm like, no. They need to know you really well and be able to really clearly articulate your strengths and your weaknesses and get constructive criticism. And, basically looking at the common letter of recommendation, I recommend everybody take a look at that. Most schools accept it now, which is great. It helps streamline the process for the recommenders, and look at the questions really carefully, and then determine who are you going to ask. And I have conversations with my clients all the time, who's best, and I'm like, okay, who knows you the best? What's your gut? Who's going to be the advocate for you? All of that. So it's but anyway, so that's a big one. I think that people think, oh, well, the higher the title, the stronger the recommendation, and that's not at all the case.
Definitely not. No, that makes so much sense. The more someone knows you, the more they can really speak to your strengths, and even frame your weaknesses as potential strengths, right?
Right.
They're more willing to do that versus someone who, in terms of recommendation, is there anything that you tell your students about whether they should waive their rights to see the recommendations? And is that a myth that you should always waive your rights, or that you should never waive your rights?
Well, honestly, I don't know it so much from the perspective of the admissions office, other than I know that when I was at Fuqua, it would be, I don't want to say a red flag, but it just was like, why wouldn't they just waive their right? And so I think that it does raise, just an eyebrow, and whenever possible, I'm telling my clients, you don't want them to furrow their brow and say, I wonder why she did that. So basically you want it to go through smoothly. And why would you need to, I think that's a FERPA, and who knows what that stands for. That's some kind of I have to look it up, but it's the law that allows, that they can access their application after it's submitted. And that's the reason that we have to ask that question. And basically I tell my clients, waive your right. You don't want to raise any, eyebrows or furrow brows. I'm like, why do you feel like you need to have access to those recommendations or the application as a whole? So I need to look up FERPA, or somebody look up FERPA.
I had to say that, having.
Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I have to say that, it is very heartening to see that people wanting the higher title is across different cultures. So everybody wants a higher title for the recommender. So coming to another big myth, people think that if they don't apply in round one, they won't get the pot of money or the scholarships. So how true is it?
Oh, sorry. I was trying to look up FERPA. The earlier you apply, the bigger the pot of money is. It's kind of like the bigger the pot, the number of seats are there, and the bigger the pot of money is there. However, I know that I could say all schools, you're not gonna have a problem if you're a merit-worthy candidate in round two. You're probably gonna get it. Again, moving to further rounds, then it becomes more challenging because they've allocated a lot of those funds. But I think again, that's another reason to apply earlier too. If round one, the whole pot is there. So they've got more to give at that point, and they're going to want to give it out and recruit, get the students that they really want. And they may get to round two, or later in round two or into round three, they give money. They may not have as much to give. And, even if they want to come after you and offer you, money to recruit you, they may not have it at that point.
Kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Bara, anything to talk about the money?
Yeah. So I've got a question about the myth that I don't know the answer to. Is it in application essays, should people write out a detailed plan of what they're going to expect to do at the school or not? Like it feels to me like some applicants will say that they've got this like huge, like very clear path of why they're going to school. But when we speak to adcoms, they're always talking about it being a place where people can be curious and discover, right? So what's true? Do you write what you're going to do, or do you write that you're open to discover?
Good question. Wow. Okay. So first I'll start by saying the very easy answer is answer whatever questions being asked. That's not a myth so much or whatever. But a lot of times my clients are trying to write answers to questions that aren't there. Like, you really use the prompt as your guide to what you're answering, right? So that's important. And that sounds silly, but you'd be shocked. But more importantly, the question that you're asking, Bara, is, I think, short-term and long-term goals. Like, I don't really know what I want to do. That's why I'm going to business school, right? I mean, that's the reality for some people. So this is what I tell folks and what I know from my experience there. It's important that you've got a plan and an idea of something. And what I always say is your goals, your short-term goals have to be clear, concise, and attainable. And attainability is the biggest issue. Like they need to know, the AdCom needs to know that they can help you get to where you want to go, right? So, and that you're self-aware enough to know, okay, this is my past experience in conjunction with my MBA from Harvard or Duke or Stanford or Tuck or wherever. I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to be, and most people, shouldn't say most, many people want to make a pivot. So they want to pivot. Maybe they've been in, consumer packaged goods, they've been in marketing, but now they want to kind of move into consulting. So they need the MBA and the foundation and all of that to be able to get them to make that pivot. And but it needs to make sense. It needs to, show that you've done your research, talk to, current students, maybe recent alumni, like what's doable for me. So that's that part of the answer. And then the reality is like, okay, so what if I don't really know what I want? And that's okay, but you still have to be able to articulate it for most schools. For example, Sloan doesn't ask for goals. I went to a conference several years ago, Bara, I think you were there with me. And they said, we don't ask because we did a study on all the people who gave us their goals, and 90% of the folks who came in with certain specific goals did something different. So it doesn't matter. The goal doesn't really matter. Because you're going to be exposed to so many cool things and people and new networks and exposure, to doing international travel and just things that you never knew even existed, that you may end up doing something completely different. And that's okay once you're admitted. And that doesn't mean I want my clients to be disingenuous or fake or anything. I mean, I want them to really articulate what they want to do. It has to be clear and thought out. Not only do you have to be able to write it, I'm sorry, I'm going on and on, but not only do you need to be able to write it, but you need to be able to back it up in an interview. So, I tell my clients, I want you to write what you're passionate about. What do you really, truly want to do? What's authentic? And then, because you're going to be asked about it in the interview, most likely. And so you need to be able to back it up in the way you express yourself and that you've demonstrated you've done your research. So, once you're in, they're not going to hold you to what you said when you applied. But it is important that you have a plan and you're able to think it through and show you've done your research. Very good question.
Well, it reminds me also how important it is to be, what you're saying, genuine, right? It's so important because, and I think it's a myth that you want to produce what they want to see, which is, you really don't. You really want to show who you are so you can show up and be authentic. And they know the class they're putting together, they know who you are. But it's a myth, like in lots of situations, dating, right? Like you wind up putting on this facade thinking that maybe I should be what they want me to be, and then I'll be accepted more readily in round one. But in reality, they're going to accept you because they want the full you that really shows up. And the more that you're not authentic, then you've got other issues to deal with, right? Like, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I think like our tagline should be authentic in probably everything. And I had a question here, like so coming to especially the applicant pool, and there's like the rumor that like hey, a lot of layoffs happening, so many people going to business school. So if I don't go into round one, I'm not going to get in because this year is so competitive. Everyone's talking about it and so on. What do you think?
I think that it may be more competitive. I mean, that's one of the variables that you can't control. We can't control how many people are going to apply. We can't control when the tech industry tanks and lays a lot of people off. Or years ago when I was at Fuqua, it was consulting. The consulting industry tanked and laid a lot of people off. So yeah, again, it goes back to what we said before. Like if you can apply in round one, great, do it. But if you're not ready for round one, then you need to wait till round two, regardless of how competitive it's going to be. Just because if you put in a subpar application in round one or round two, you're just not going to get admitted. So it doesn't really matter. And if it's more competitive, it's going to be even harder if it's subpar.
That's so interesting.
You know what keeps running in my head with all the things that you're saying is that it's so important to have an admissions consultant. It really is. But I mean, the myth is that I can do this alone or I can't do this alone. But again, it depends on the individual. But having an admissions consultant really steers you through the labyrinth of choosing the school, which is as important, researching the school, which is not just reading or not just visiting, but talking to students. It really makes a big difference. I mean, so much about the MBA Waves that we've been doing over the past couple of years, like it really demonstrates that yes, you can do this on your own, but it's such a good business decision to bring in professionals to help you, right? So that's what's coming up for me.
I agree, and I'll just kind of toot our horns, if I may. And this is not just me, this is collectively and probably, and not just within Stacey Blackman, but in consulting in general. One thing I'm most proud of in what I do is obviously helping clients attain their goals and get to where they want to go, helping to steer them when possible, and showing them, maybe opening some options that they might not have considered. I have a vivid memory of a woman I worked with several years ago who didn't think Yale was on her radar, it wasn't even in her wheelhouse. She didn't think. And I looked at her candidacy, I evaluated her quickly, and I said, absolutely, I think this is a possibility for you. And she had no idea. Long story short, of course, she was admitted. I wouldn't tell the story if she wouldn't. She was admitted and absolutely thrilled and had no idea that it was even possible for her. She didn't know that it was something she could attain, and it absolutely was based on what she had to offer. But she needed needed somebody to kind of nudge her. And in addition, and so that's not just me, that happens all the time within the consulting industry. So getting you above where you think you want to go. Sometimes it's talking the other direction too. Often it is, but those are the really special times. And in addition to that, talking to folks and encouraging them. I tailor it to what they need. And if they need money, because I've got clients who are like, I can't go unless I get merit scholarship. So I'm like, okay, let's look at your target school list and let's make sure we target schools that enable you to really be in the running for merit scholarship. And that is a huge, and sometimes those are top tier schools too, but that is a huge, makes me really proud because I know it's expensive to hire us. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not, I understand that. And so when when one of my clients earns a huge merit scholarship that totally outweighs, what he or she had to pay for working with me, I feel great because I'm like, yes, yes, it was, it was worth the investment. It doesn't always happen, but when it does happen, it just makes me feel great. So
Yeah, I
Yeah.
often tell students they need to front end, like to think
mhm,
about front ending, like look at the big picture. And if a higher test score is going to allow you to be in the running for financial financial benefit,
mhm,
then it's worth spending the money and getting your score where you want it to be. It's not only going to get you into the school possibly, but also give you these opportunities. And the bottom line is we're almost a drop in the bucket as compared to what the
sure.
schools cost. But up front, when all of a sudden you're thinking about all the things you need to pay for, yes, it is an investment. But I always say that applying to business school is like it's a business decision. Like this,
Mhm.
the whole process of how you present yourself and how you show up, and are you on time for round one? And if you're not, there's got to be a good reason, right? And going back to the initial thing that we were talking about. So yeah, it really does make sense for many students to bring in that support. You can go to a gym, right? And you can work out and you can do whatever it is. But if someone's there telling you the best form, that time in the gym is going to be probably better spent because someone was guiding you along the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the last analogy to the gym. You do need a personal trainer because you get the instant feedback. Okay, and coming to, one probably last question here. So there is a myth that round one is easier now because of all the AI generated tools available out there, and all the chat GPT led, other minions, I would say, for helping with writing. Do you guys think that's true or not?
I I don't know how I don't understand how the AI would help. I mean, I understand it's supposed to help you in your writing. I don't know. I don't. That's not something I agree with or think that students or applicants should be using necessarily. But I don't know how that would help them to make round one easier. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question.
This was actually like posed to me by a client saying that, hey, I have ChatGPT, I can write the essays faster.
Oh, I see. So they can write
Mhm.
them faster, and so then be ready for round one. Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any of the chat GPT or whatever it's called, or the AI. I haven't seen any of those really. So, and I don't, at least my clients haven't told me they've used them. So, I don't know. I mean, Bara, do you have any thoughts there? I haven't really run into it. So it's just interesting. I don't know, I guess.
Well, what I think is, I think what's interesting to me in this process is that some schools are embracing
Hmm.
this and some schools are coming up with ways to combat it,
Hmm.
right? And not that you would choose a school either way, but it feels like Grammarly and things that help us in our writing are just a tool.
Hmm.
So it seems like I mean, I think it's going to be pretty pervasive. I think we're not going to be able to escape either of these technological advances. And
Hmm.
so how do you use it to your advantage? How do you um, use that even as not as a first draft that you can go back in and insert yourself in it into
Hmm.
what's being written. So, but I haven't specifically come up about that with round one. Do I think it's easier? I think that the only reason that round one might be easier is a mindset that there's more spaces open.
Hmm.
And so you're not exactly what you were saying before, Sherry. Like, I'm just reiterating, like, there's more seats. They don't know exactly what the class looks like yet. And so if you're in at the ground floor, you're being accepted as part of the foundational crew member of the class they're putting together. So that seems to me to make it at least seem like it's easier because they're not trying to, you know, put you through like, oh, well, how are they going to fit in as much?
And
But
one other thing I would say is I just think that it's possible that there's not, worst case, you apply in round one and you're denied, right? Then then you have no alternative unless you're going to reapply next year or apply elsewhere, this year. But there is the chance of waitlist, right? So if you apply early and then are waitlisted so that they can kind of compare you to other applicants in their next rounds, waitlist is not the end of the world. It's painful. I understand to my clients, but it's a heck of a lot better than a deny. So I'm like, we can work with waitlist. You can work on what, if there are blemishes in your application, do you need to take a class? Are there things that you can do between now and when they're making the next decision to enhance your candidacy? Absolutely. So we work on that. So that's just another thought, is that an aside, if you apply in round one and aren't admitted but are waitlisted, then it's not the end of the world. There's plenty that you can do to get off of that wait list.
All right. So looks like we're coming to an end. What would be your parting tip and advice for those who are applying to round one?
Take a breath. Take a breath. And, what I worked on with my clients is, look at the whole picture. Like Bara, you were talking about, look at the big picture, look at all the components. And that's what we do at the beginning of our consulting process. Look at the big picture, get all of the things in place so you have them all on your radar somewhere, and so that and then kind of methodically move through it and do what you can, breathing all the way, and I think also going back to what you said, Krithika, is being authentic is really vital, and that's what's going to make you, that differentiates you as a candidate, is just truly being yourself and authentic. Those would be my tips.
Beautiful tips. Like I'm gonna take the breathe always, right? Because right now I can feel the pressure and panic from so many of my clients.
Yep.
Like, what do I do? What do I do? And I think it's so important to keep the big picture, as you rightly said, because they lose focus on just sitting down and crafting the 300-word essay or the 500-word essay, and lose focus on what matters. And Bara, like, what do you think is your tip?
My tip is to be honest with yourself about where you're at in the moment. And if round one is going to be what you're going to be moving towards, as long as it's not causing any harm, then great, go for it. But being honest with yourself and not giving yourself a hard time if you need to apply it in another round.
Yeah, that resonates with me so much. And I was just going to say that, lean into the process, because the whole process is also transformative.
Mm-hmm.
The application journey itself is supposed to get the transformation kickstarted. So you might as well like enjoy the process and enjoy the ride. So that's all the time we have for this episode. I want to thank our featured guest, Shari Holland from CC Blackman Consulting today, and to all our guests from in the audience today. MBA hopefuls, if you liked today's episode, please give us a little thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to MBA Waves to stay on top of all the latest trends and news in the world of MBAs, business, and education. And please don't forget to check us out next week, same time and place. And for full access of upcoming and past episodes, head on to mbawaves.com. Bye for now. Good luck, everybody, for round one.
Good luck.